At exactly 2:13 a.m., this hospital followed a rule that was never written down. It wasn't in any manual. It wasn't posted on any wall. And officially, it didn't exist. But every single person who worked a night shift knew it. At 2:13 a.m., no one was allowed to enter one specific room. Not doctors, not nurses, not security. No one. And the reason had nothing to do with infection control, structural damage, or patient safety. The reason was far worse, because every night, at the exact same minute, something inside that room became active. The strange part is, the hospital never admitted that the room existed at all. During the day, the building looked completely normal: bright lights, clean floors, the steady sound of machines keeping people alive. Patients walked the halls. Doctors moved from room to room. Nurses checked charts and adjusted IVs. Nothing about the hospital suggested fear. But when midnight passed, everything changed. The lights in one hallway were always dimmer than the rest. The air felt colder, and staff members, without being told, avoided walking past a certain door. They didn't avoid it because of a rumor. They avoided it because of experience. People who worked there long enough began to notice patterns. Call buttons activating from empty rooms, monitors turning on by themselves, and clocks stopping only in one section of the building. Always at 2:13 a.m., security cameras facing that hallway had a habit of malfunctioning at the same time every night. Not breaking. Not shutting off. Just losing clarity. The footage would become grainy. The audio would distort, and sometimes the video would skip forward several seconds, as if something had been removed. When technicians reviewed the recordings, they found nothing useful, and they were told not to look deeper. New employees weren't warned right away. The hospital didn't want questions, and they didn't want fear spreading. So instead, new staff learned the rule the same way everyone else did, by almost breaking it. One nurse later described the feeling as walking past a room that feels aware of you. She said it felt like being watched not from the hallway, but from inside the walls. Another staff member said the door never looked the same twice. Sometimes it looked older, sometimes cleaner, sometimes like it hadn't been opened in years. But it was always closed, and after midnight, it was always avoided. What made the situation even stranger was the paperwork. There were no patient records connected to that room, no admission history, no discharge forms. On the hospital's official blueprints, the room didn't exist, yet everyone knew exactly where it was. Ask any night shift nurse to draw the floor from memory, and every single one of them would include that room without hesitation. They just wouldn't label it, because labeling it felt like acknowledging it, and acknowledging it felt dangerous. At exactly 2:13 a.m., alarms would sometimes chirp once and stop. 4 pumps would briefly show error messages, and in rare cases, a voice could be heard through the intercom system. Not loud, not clear, just enough to make people stop walking. The hospital later blamed electrical interference, but former staff members say that explanation never made sense, because the voice didn't sound mechanical. It sounded human. The rule wasn't enforced. With punishment, no one was ever written up for going near the room, because no one wanted to. Except one night. One night, someone either didn't know the rule or chose not to follow it. And that night is the reason the hospital went from quiet warnings to complete denial. After that incident, the hallway was partially sealed. Cleaning schedules were changed, staff rotations were adjusted, and the hospital administration made a final decision. They removed the room from all official records, as if erasing it on paper would erase it in reality. But here's the problem. Buildings don't forget, and neither do the people who were there. To this day, former employees refuse to speak on record. Some won't even say the hospital's name. Others say they still wake up at night and check the time. Because once you've worked there, once you've felt that silence at 2:13 a.m., you never forget it. And you never walk past a closed hospital door the same way again. Because some rooms aren't empty. They're waiting. During the day, the hospital looked like any other. Bright hallways, clean floors, the constant sound of footsteps, machines, and quiet conversations. Patients moved in and out of rooms, Doctors rushed between departments. Nurses followed their routines without question. Nothing about the building suggested that something was wrong. Nothing, except one detail most visitors never noticed. The fourth floor. Officially, it existed, but no one ever stayed there long. Staff members passed through it quickly. Security cameras covered the hallways. Maintenance crews cleaned it during daylight hours. Yet after midnight, everything about that floor changed. Night shift workers noticed it first. The air felt colder there. Not dramatically, just enough to be uncomfortable. Enough to make people hesitate before walking down the hall. Lights flickered more often on that floor, not completely shutting off. Just long enough to make shadows stretch unnaturally along the walls. Some nurses reported hearing sounds, soft sounds. Too quiet to be alarms, too clear to be machinery. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. But when they checked the hallway, it was always empty. At first, supervisors dismissed these reports. Night shifts are long. Fatigue plays tricks on the mind. Hospitals are full of unfamiliar sounds. But one pattern couldn't be ignored. Every strange report happened after midnight, and every report mentioned the same area. One specific room. It didn't stand out during the day. A standard door. A small window. A faded room number that looked like it had been replaced more than once. There were no warning signs on it. No locks that looked unusual. Yet staff avoided it instinctively. New employees were never formally trained about the room. There was no mention of it in orientation. Instead, the warnings were quiet. Unspoken. A nurse would stop a trainee. A doctor would change direction without explanation. Security guards would glance at their watches and move on. When asked why, the answer was always the same. You don't need to be there. By midnight, the hallway outside that room was always empty. Not because it was restricted, but because no one wanted to be the last person standing near it. Some staff claimed the door was never fully closed at night. Others insisted it was always locked, but were true, depending on the night. Cleaning crews reported something stranger. When they cleaned the room during the day, everything was normal. Bed sheets, equipment, walls. But the next morning, small details would be different. A chair slightly moved, curtains pulled back, a faint smell, metallic, sharp, impossible to place. No alarms ever went off. No sensors were triggered. It was as if the room operated outside the hospital's systems. One maintenance worker claimed the room didn't appear on older blueprints. Another said the numbering skipped entirely in archived documents. But when questioned, hospital administration denied everything. According to official records, the room was never special. Never sealed, never restricted. And yet, after midnight, no one entered it. Not doctors, not nurses, not security. The rule was never written down, never enforced. It simply existed, and everyone followed it. Because those who didn't rarely stayed on the night shift for long. There was nothing special about the door at first. No warning sign. No red tape. No label explaining danger, just another hospital room door at the end of a quiet hallway. And yet, everyone knew. Doctors avoided walking past it. Nurses lowered their voices near it. Security guards changed routes to stay away from it. It wasn't written in any manual. It wasn't mentioned in any official training. But every night shift worker learned the rule the same way. You do not enter that room after midnight. The room had a number once. At least, that's what older staff members claimed. But by the time most people noticed it, the number plate was gone. No digits. No label. Just a clean rectangle where something used to be. Strangely, hospital maps still showed a room in that exact location, but the name was missing. The space was blank, as if someone had erased it. Carefully, during the day, the door stayed closed. Locked. Silent. But at night, something changed. Nurses reported that the door looked different after midnight. Not open, not fully closed. Just slightly off, as if it had been disturbed. No patient was ever assigned to that room. No medical equipment was stored inside. No cleaning staff were scheduled to enter it at night. In fact, Housekeeping logs showed something impossible. The room was cleaned every morning, yet no one was ever listed as having cleaned it. When new staff members asked questions, they were given vague answers. It's under maintenance. It's not in use. Just don't worry about it. But worry was impossible to avoid, because every night, between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock a.m., strange things happened near that door. Coal lights would activate on the nurse's station panel. Always the same one, always the same location. When nurses checked the system, their room wasn't assigned to any patient. Sometimes the call light would turn off by itself. Sometimes it wouldn't. Footsteps were reported in the hallway outside the room. Slow, measured, heavy. But when security reviewed the cameras, the hallway was empty. No movement, no shadow, no person, only silence. One nurse later described the feeling like this. It felt like the room knew we were nearby. Temperature sensors showed unexplained drops around the door. Not the entire floor, just that section of the hallway. Cold enough to trigger alarms, not cold enough to explain. And then there was the sound. Not loud, not sudden, a low, distant noise. Some said it sounded like breathing. Others said it was more like whispering. No one could ever agree on the words. Only that it felt intentional, as if something was trying to speak, but couldn't. Doctors refused to examine the room after midnight, even during emergencies. One senior physician reportedly said, "If someone collapses in that hallway after midnight, we moved them. We moved them. We do not open that door." That statement alone terrified new staff. Hospitals are built to save lives. Rules are broken when seconds matter. But this rule was never broken. Not until the night everything changed. But before that happened, one thing became very clear. The room was not abandoned. It was being avoided. And whatever was inside did not need to leave, because people came close enough on their own. Every night, without realizing it, she had only been working at the hospital for 3 weeks. New uniform, new schedule, night shift. She wasn't supposed to be assigned to that floor. At least, that's what she was told later. The first few nights were quiet. Normal hospital, quiet, soft beeping machines. Dim hallway lights. Nothing unusual until the 4th night. At exactly 2:11 a.m., a call light blinked on the nurse station panel. A room request. She looked at the screen. The room number didn't make sense. It wasn't assigned to any patient. In fact, it wasn't assigned at all, assuming it was a system error. She reset the panel. 2 minutes passed, 2:13 a.m. The call light activated again. Same room. She checked the patient records. No name, no chart, no admission history. The room didn't exist. When she mentioned it to another nurse, the reaction was immediate. The conversation stopped. Eye contact was avoided. Finally, the other nurse spoke quietly. "Don't answer that." When asked why, she replied, "That room doesn't take patients at night." No explanation followed. The subject was dropped, but curiosity lingered. At 2:13 a.m., the call light blinked again. Against protocol, she walked partway down the hallway. The air felt colder there. Heavier. Unnaturally still. She stopped several feet from the door. It was close. Then, she noticed the handle. It was turning. Slowly, as if someone inside was testing it. She stepped back. The call light shut off. She returned to the station and logged it as a system malfunction. That should have been the end. It wasn't. The next night, same shift, same floor. At 2:13 a.m., the call light came on again. This time, the screen displayed a single word. Help. Seconds later, it vanished. No record remained. Later, passing the hallway, she saw the door slightly open. Inside was darkness. No bed, no equipment, only long marks on the wall. As if something had been dragged. She never entered the room. By morning, she requested a transfer. It was approved immediately. No questions asked. Years later, she would say, Only this. At night, the hospital doesn't feel empty. It feels occupied. The hospital had security cameras on every floor, every hallway, every corner. Except one. The cameras outside that room technically existed. They were installed, connected, powered, but they never worked the way they were supposed to. Security logs later showed that every night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., the feed facing that hallway would distort. Not shut off, not disconnect. Distort. Static would crawl across the screen. The image would stretch. Timestamps would flicker, and then something stranger happened. The clock on the footage would freeze. Las 2:13 alto am. For several minutes, sometimes longer, the video would continue recording. But time stopped moving. Guards described watching the hallway in real time, while the clock refused to change. No motion alerts, no visible movement. Just an empty corridor and a frozen moment. On several recordings, audio sensors picked up faint sounds, not footsteps, not voices, more like breathing. Slow, uneven, as if something was standing just outside the camera's view. One guard reported seeing a shadow pass across the screen. Not a person. Not a reflection. A shape that bent the light around it. When he rewound the footage, the shadow wasn't there. The system logs showed no errors. No tampering. No explanation. After multiple incidents, security was instructed to stop monitoring that camera during night shifts. The official reason was technical instability. Unofficially, guards were told something else. Don't watch it too closely. Because anyone who did reported the same thing. A feeling that the camera wasn't observing the hallway. The hallway was observing them. And always, at 2:13 a.m. No one knows who entered the room first. The hospital never released a report. No statement, no official explanation, but former staff members agree on one detail. That night, something broke the rule. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the security desk noticed movement on the floor monitor. Not on the camera feed, on the access log. A door had been opened, the door to the room that didn't exist. According to the system, no keycard was used, no fingerprint scan, no manual override. The door simply unlocked itself. A nurse on duty noticed it seconds later. She was standing at the end of the hallway when she saw the light spill out. The room door was open. That was never supposed to happen. She didn't move closer. She didn't call out. She later said the silence felt wrong. Not. Quiet. Heavy. As if the air itself was pressing down. Then the door slowly closed. On its own. At the nurse station, every monitor briefly went dark. Heart rate monitors flatlined. Her pumps shut off. Even the wall clock stopped. All at the same moment. Las 2:13 alto am. For exactly 46 seconds, the floor had no recorded activity. No video, no audio, no data. When the systems came back online, alarms began sounding from multiple rooms. Patients were panicking. Some reported hearing footsteps. Others said they heard someone whispering nearby close to their beds. But no one was there. Security was dispatched to the floor. When they reached the end of the hallway, they found the door. Sealed. Locked. Just like it had always been. No signs of forced entry. No damage. No explanation. Inside the room, nothing appeared out of place. No furniture. No equipment. Except for one thing. On the floor, near the center of the room, there were fresh marks. As if something heavy had been dragged or pulled. The nurse who first noticed the open door was taken off duty that night. She never returned to work. Officially, she resigned. Unofficially, staff members say she stopped speaking altogether. By morning, the room was permanently sealed. The hallway cameras were removed. The door number was erased, and access to that section of the floor was restricted. When questioned later, hospital administrators gave a single response. There was no incident. But after that night, one thing changed. The call light never activated again, and no one ever questioned why. After that night, things changed quietly, not dramatically, not publicly, but permanently. The hallway where the room was located was no longer included in night shift assignments. Staff schedules were adjusted without explanation. Certain doors were marked as maintenance access only, even though no repairs were ever seen. And the room itself, it was sealed. No official announcement was made. No incident report was shared. But employees noticed something strange. The very next evening, the room number was gone. Not covered, not scratched out. Removed. As if it had never been there. When staff checked the hospital's digital floor plans, the space where the room should have been appeared as a blank section of wall. No label. No number. Just empty blueprint space. One longtime employee asked administration about it. The response was short. There's never been a room there. Security footage from that wing was no longer accessible. Not deleted, just unavailable. Requests to review all the recordings were denied due to data corruption. And anyone who asked too many questions stopped asking, because the reactions were always the same. Meetings ended early. Emails went unanswered. Supervisors changed the subject. It became an unspoken rule. That floor was to be avoided after midnight. Some staff claimed they could still hear things when passing the sealed section late at night. Not voices, more like movement. A faint, dragging sound. A soft knock. Sometimes the unmistakable sound of a call light chime brief. Distant and impossible. But when they checked the station panel, nothing was active. No alerts. No room requests. No errors. Officially, nothing was wrong. Within weeks, several employees requested transfers. Their requests were approved immediately. No interviews, no exit questions. No resistance. One nurse later said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. They didn't want us to stay curious. They wanted silence. Years later, the hospital underwent renovations. New paint, new equipment, new administration. But that section of the building was never expanded, never repurposed. It remains exactly as it was, a sealed space between walls. Former employees still refuse to talk about it on record. Off record, some will admit one thing. The call lights didn't stop. They were simply no longer connected, and occasionally very rare lead security guards working overnight claim their radios pick up something strange when they pass that area. Not static, not interference. A faint sound that resembles breathing. Slow, patient, waiting. By morning, the hospital returned to normal. Day staff arrived. Patients filled the halls. Doctors moved from room to room. And the night was quietly erased. Officially, the hospital denied everything. There was no forbidden room, no missing files, no unusual incidents. Administrators explained it away as confusion, a software glitch, a misunderstanding by new staff. According to the records, the floor was perfectly ordinary. But former employees tell a different story. They say the floor plan was altered years ago. That one room was removed from public blueprints. That night shift staff were warned, quietly, informally. Not in writing, not during training, only through looks. Through silence. Through the way experienced nurses refuse to walk past a certain door after midnight. Even today, the hospital remains open. Patients are admitted. Surgeries are performed. Lives are saved. And if you visit during the day, nothing feels wrong. But some night guards claim that at exactly 2:30 a.m., something still happens. Cameras briefly lose signal. Call systems reset themselves, and one corridor becomes noticeably colder than the rest of the building. No alarms sound. No announcements are made. Just a single door. Without a number, without a handle that reflects light properly. A door no one acknowledges. Former staff say the rule still exists. Not officially, not publicly, but everyone working nights knows it. When the clock reaches to you do not walk down that hallway. You do not answer unfamiliar call lights, and you do not check rooms that aren't on the schedule. Because the hospital isn't empty at night. It never was. And whatever occupies that room doesn't need to be seen to be present.